Next, the procedure. And this is where I find a lot of students struggle, is describing what they've done. And again, remember, this is only for part B of your experiment. So you don't need to talk about the corn syrup and you don't need to talk about the water. You're only going to talk about your particular solution that you did. So it's going to be short summary of the important steps. Make sure that it's repeatable. What that means is that if you had someone else who didn't have a clue about what this lab was doing try to follow your procedure, they'd have to be able to do it exactly as you did. So it has to be very specific. Including diagrams and illustrations is not important for this one, so don't worry about that. Do make sure that you've got specific measurements, and then disposal instructions are also important. So, putting all that together, let's look at how we might start this procedure. And again, I'll get you started so you can have an idea of what's going on here. Procedures are always done in sequence, so we're going to start with step 1. The very first thing you did, or are going to do today, depending on what stage you are here, is you need to get that water that's in your cup off of your egg, right? So you need to dump the water out of the cup with the egg, dry the cup and the egg with a paper towel. Okay, notice how every sentence doesn't need a step, right? Step 1 is 2 sentences. Kind of put similar ideas together in steps. So dumping out the water and drying everything out to me kind of goes together. So we're going to make that step 1. Okay. Oh, this is what you actually did yesterday, didn't you? Well, anyway, that's where you're going to start, right? With your water in your cup. Getting rid of that, drying everything off. Now we're on step 2. Add, now whatever your liquid is, I don't know what it is, so you have to fill that in, to the cup with the egg in it until, how much do we add? The liquid, whatever it is, covers the egg. Okay, now we're on to step 3. Step 3 was to let it sit overnight, right? So let the egg sit in whatever your liquid was for 24 hours. All right, I think this should be enough to get you started on the procedure. So you can go through to the very end. Again, don't forget at the end 2 important things that students often forget to put into their procedure is you need to tell the person who's doing this to record their data somewhere. So once you take the mass of the egg, you need to tell the person to write that down. And then, another one that people often forget, clean up. What did you do with everything when you were done? How did you clean it up? That needs to be described as well, because sometimes there's chemicals involved that need to be cleaned up in a special way. So it's important to describe that to your reader as well. So hopefully that kind of sums up the procedure for you. Now we're going to move on to the data section. The data section is basically any data tables that you have. So let's look at the description of that. It says to have your data table drawn up before you enter the lab. Because I wasn't with you for this one, we weren't able to do that, but I think we'll be able to put it together now and you guys should be set. If you have any observations of the eggs as you've been collecting data, you could add that to the section. Make sure the data table has lines, all the units are labeled, it has a title, and it's big enough. So lots of things to think about here. Alright, so on our lab report, you're going to want to go to Table, Insert Table, and then I'm not sure off the top of my head how many actual rows and columns you're going to need, so we'll just start with a 4 by 4 and see how that goes, and we can always add more rows and columns as we need. So there's your data table. Now the information I want in your data table is what happened to your egg measurements each day. So this does include the water and the corn syrup because this is going to back up some of the information you talk about later in your conclusion. And then I also want to know what the change in the mass was for each day. Okay, so we're going to have not only the mass, and what unit is mass measured in? Grams. But we also want the change in mass, again, in grams. And if you made any observations, or want to add observations about what happened to your egg, what it looked like, what it felt like, that would be a good place to put it as well, right there in that third column. Okay, the next thing that we need to put down on our first column here is the actual different solutions that the egg was in. So the first one, we need the mass of the egg after vinegar. Right, you took that egg first day after been soaking in vinegar and you found a mass of it. Now the change in mass is not going to be needed for this one because obviously we don't have a mass to compare it to yet. So we can just fill that one in. Usually you can shade these, but we're just going to do this because this works just as well. Okay, we're not going to have a change in mass for that particular one. Then the next thing you put it in after the vinegar, you rinsed it, you dried it off, and you put it in corn syrup. So we're going to put after corn syrup. Again, what was the actual mass after it was in the corn syrup for 24 hours? And now you can do the change in mass. So just to throw this out there, let's say after the vinegar the egg was 30 grams, and after corn syrup it was 20 grams. That means the change in mass was 10 grams. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. The last one that you did for part A was after water. And again, we'll just pretend your measurement after water was 40 grams. And the change in mass was 20 grams. Oh, and this brings up a good point. From vinegar to corn syrup, it lost 10 grams, right? From 30 to 20 is a decrease. So we need to put a negative 10 there. And from corn syrup to water, it gained 20 grams. So we need to put a plus there. All right? And then it looks like we do need one more row. So I'm right-clicking, and I'm going to insert another row below. And this is where you put in your liquid of choice. So after whatever it is you put it in, milk or soap or pop or whatever. Let's say it went to, 35 grams. Again, I'm just making up numbers, which means it went from 40 to 35, which is a loss of 5 grams. And then any observations that you want to look at or add. All right, so that's the majority of our data. The last thing you need to put on a data table is a title. And we worked on titles in class, so make sure that your title says specifically what's in your data table. Okay, so it needs to describe to the reader what it is that the data table shows. It shouldn't be like Osmosis data table. That doesn't tell me anything at all about what's actually in here. It needs to be specific to what we tested.